unlocking your world of creativity with best-selling author and brand innovator, Mark Stinson. This episode is brought to you by White Cloud Coffee Roasters, nestled in the heart of Idaho's mountain wilderness, where every bean tells a story of adventure. Discover the difference in their premium beans, meticulously roasted to capture the essence of the mountains. Now, listeners of our podcast can get an exclusive 10% discount. Just use the promo code CREATIVITY at checkout. Visit whitecloudcoffee.com and use the code CREATIVITY.
Well, welcome back, friends, to our podcast, Your World of Creativity. And boy, what a world it's been. Our journey together, we've explored the creative processes of writers of all kinds, authors, novelists, reporters, playwrights, songwriters, also designers, including interior designers, but also architects and even scientists about their creative process. So it's fun talking to all the guests about their unique insights about how they develop ideas, how they organize them, and ultimately push the creative boundaries and get the confidence to launch the work out into the world. And so today we're going to continue that thought process, transforming our work, our creativity into reality. And my guest is Melissa Dinwiddie. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Mark. It's just a delight to be here.
The ideas of creativity have really been personal to you. I read about your dreaming of Juilliard as a teenager, and now you're empowering leaders and teams through your Create the Impossible. It's in workshops, so I can't wait to get into all of that and how you've mastered the art of making these big dreams come true. I think we have to start with the dance classes. At young ages in your teenage years, you wanted to attend Juilliard, and you did after the inspiration came to you. Tell us about the mindset shift and the creativity that it took to make that happen.
That was really interesting because when I was much, much younger, I remember having a friend in maybe first or second grade who was taking, I think it was probably ballet classes. And I remember her telling me, "Oh, you should take dance classes. You're really graceful." And I remember thinking, "Oh, I would love to do that." But I was really shy. And I had this, I don't know where I got it, but I had this image in my head of the mean ballet, big stick that would bound on the floor or something. And I never screwed up the courage to even ask my parents if I could take a ballet class or dance class. And it wasn't until I was much older, I was in high school. And actually, you know what finally got me to take dance classes was I dislocated my knee, it was my sophomore year in high school. And so I couldn't take PE for was like a few months or something.
Mhm.
And when I finally came back, I discovered, I don't know how I didn't know this before, but there was an option to take dance as PE, which somehow I didn't know about. And so I signed up for the school dance class option, and it was not really teaching you much dance technique or anything. The teacher was about 300 pounds, but we got to do tap one semester and something else another semester. And the really good dancers in that class took classes at a private school in my city. And so later, not that year, but the summer after my junior year, so before my senior year in high school, I was 16 years old already. I started taking classes at that school. And after my very first class there, the teacher pulled me aside and said, "Where do you dance? You're really good." And I said, "Palo Alto High School." And he said, "No, where do you dance? You're really good." And I said, "Palo Alto High School." And it just made me feel so amazing that this teacher was complimenting me, and I wanted to dance every day. I was so in love with it. And within a few months, I was dancing every day. And that summer, whenever that was, it was like the following summer, I was dancing 3 to 6 hours a day. And my senior year in high school, I was dancing every single day. I guess it was 3 to 4.5 hours a day. And then I ended up going to college for a year, and I was so frustrated because I could only dance. I was still dancing every day, but I couldn't
Right.
get as many hours in. And so after that first year in college, I took a year off. I took a year off after high school, actually. And that's when I was dancing the 3 to 4.5 hours or 6 hours a day. And then I went to college for a year at UC Berkeley. And that's when I was super frustrated because I wasn't dancing nearly as much as I wanted to. And I went home over the summer, and that same dance teacher pulled me aside and he said, "What are you doing? You're wasting your life at UC Berkeley. You should be going to Juilliard." That same private dance school in Palo Alto, 3 of the students from that school who were around my age, a little younger, one was a little older, had all auditioned for Juilliard. Juilliard holds auditions all over the world. And they had auditioned in San Francisco. And 3 of them had gotten into Juilliard.
Love
And
it.
Juilliard has maybe 15 or 20 kids in each class each year. And my teacher said, "You should be going to Juilliard with the rest of these 3." And I was crying. Anyway, I went home that night and I told my parents I was going to audition for Juilliard. They had one more set of auditions in New York City the week before school started. So I flew off to New York at the end of the summer with 2 big suitcases, and I auditioned for Juilliard and I got in. So that was the story. And then I actually had a miserable year. I hated Juilliard. It was a terrible place for me, and I ended up getting injured, and that was the end of my dance career. But I did have that one year at Juilliard, my claim to fame. And it was the end of my dance career, and it was a terrible year. It was a horrible thing that happened, and it was devastating. And I spent 5 years on the quest for the miracle cure. And because that happened, it took a very long time for this to happen, but it ultimately led to me discovering many other ways in which I could be creative.
Yes. And the thought is obviously when you say my dance career ended, but it maybe only was the springboard to these other creative pursuits, huh?
Yeah.
I'm reading about your calligraphy and jazz dancing and improvs and now corporate innovation, coaching and teaching creativity. Obviously, these diverse creative experiences influenced you to really take the creativity to a next step. What were some of those milestones in developing this as a vocation, as something that you wanted to do?
Yeah, so interesting because as Steve Jobs said in that famous speech, the graduation speech, and in many other times, he talked about how you connect dots and you can only see those dots looking backwards, of course. And that's how I feel about my life. When I lost dance, all I knew at the time was how devastating it was. I felt like my life was over. But now looking back, I feel like that really was a springboard, as you said. And ultimately, it took me many years to figure this out. But ultimately, I went on to fall in love with the art of calligraphy. And I became a professional calligrapher and artist. And for 15 years, I had a business and a career as a professional artist. And I struggled during that time with a lot of creative block because I spent my time having to make my living from my art. I made that choice. That was how I decided to make my living. And so I bought into this story that I had to, anytime I made anything, it had to make money.
Mm.
And it had to be amazing, right? Which is an incredibly great way to become mired in perfectionism. And I could create things for my clients, but anytime I wanted to make something just for the joy of it, I would just get completely stuck and would not allow myself to make anything that wasn't amazing and didn't make any money. And so I spent about a decade just really pretty miserable because I wasn't allowing myself to make any art. Now, that said, I found other ways to create. So I ended up picking up the guitar. I ended up taking voice lessons. I already loved to sing, so I started taking lessons in singing jazz. Started performing as a jazz singer. I discovered this other area of passion and creative joy. And that never would have happened had I not become stuck in perfectionist paralysis and the comparison trap as a visual artist.
Yes.
You know, there's gifts that happen from these horrible things.
And you always think when we talk about creativity, it's like it's going to come out. But your
Yeah.
creativity, you want to suppress it, you want to keep it in. The analogy of water goes where water wants to go, and it
Yeah.
will flow somehow, some way. You've
It's
captured a lot of these experiences in your book, The Creative Sandbox Way. And I love, at first you could just talk about a creative sandbox, but you've added this idea of there's a way to encourage people to play and experiment and really express a lot of these creative things that need to come out. Why did you add the word way? Tell us about what it is about a process or a method that you really saw in the creative sandbox.
Yeah. So this came about because, first of all, I want to talk about the metaphor of the creative sandbox. That came about because I had done a trade with a life coach who was also my yoga teacher at the time. I did some web design for her in exchange for some life coaching. And at the time, I really wanted to get back to making art for the joy of it. And so she did help me get back to that. And I was making some art. And at the time, it was these brush stroke women. I call them. They're these female figures that's dancing or moving in various different ways. And some of them were in yoga poses, and they were composed of just a few brush strokes. And then they would be combined with some words in brush calligraphy, brush lettering. And they were really fun to do. And I was having a great time doing them for a while, but then I noticed that I was avoiding my art table again, and I
Mm.
couldn't figure out why. And then one day, I was standing in my studio and I looked at my art table, and it hit me that these brushstroke women, this art that I was making was really the same as the art that I had been making for clients. It was very meticulous. It was very designy. I would form a vision in my mind of what I wanted to make. I would make 50 nearly identical brushstrokes. I would scan them into the computer. I would rearrange them in Photoshop. I would make 50 identical words in calligraphy, scan
Mhm.
the best one into Photoshop, rearrange those. And it didn't have the exploration and the play and the fun that my inner child was looking for. My inner child wanted to make messes and just muck around and explore. And these brushstroke women were not letting my inner child do that. And I realized that I needed to play again. I needed to be like a kid messing around in a sandbox. I needed a creative sandbox. And it was like this light bulb went off over my head.
Mhm.
And it was like, that is it. That's what I need. I need a creative sandbox. But at the time, I realized that, yes, I need to play, but I had forgotten how to do that because I had spent 15 years making art to the specifications of clients, and I didn't know how to play anymore. So I needed to remind myself how. And I am a really good rule follower. So I put together a series of little rules for myself to help myself get into that mind space of being a 4-year-old kid again. And at the time, this was 2010 or 11, and there were maybe a handful, 3 or 4, 5 rules at the time. There were things like, there is no wrong, and think process, not product. And if you get to the place where the piece is not done, it needs something, but you're afraid to add to it because you're afraid you're going to ruin it, go ahead and ruin it, baby. Things like that. And over the next 2 or 3 years, I expanded on these rules, and I also made them more concise. That third one that was really long, when I just explained it to you, I'm going to look at my poster and I'm trying to remember what that last one was,
Yeah.
is now take the riskier path.
Mm.
So I condensed it down and made it more concise. So those rules at the time, I called them rules because I'm a rule follower, but creatives in general don't like rules. So I now call them guideposts.
Mhm.
And that and there are now 10 of them. And that set of 10 guideposts, I was invited at some point. I don't remember what year this was. Maybe it was 2014 or 2015 or something. I was invited by an online learning company to create an online course for their learning platform. They were doing this as a marketing thing. They were inviting a bunch of teachers and coaches and people to create little mini courses. And so I put together this little 5-day course and I called it Creative Sandbox 101. And hundreds of people went through this course in a period of 5 days. And I was getting all of these comments, all this feedback about how it changed people's lives and how they were reconnecting with their creativity and making art for the first time in years. And that they'd done books like The Artist's Way that were great, but they were still stuck and not making their art. And my little course had gotten them to make their art again. And it made me realize that I had something here that was really effective. They led to another, and I eventually decided to put everything together into my book. And so the 10 guideposts now form the backbone of my book, The Creative Sandbox Way. And really, the way came about because it is a habit. It is a way of being to continually come back to these guideposts. It's not a one and done. It is, I still, to this day, and probably until my dying day, will struggle with the comparison trap, with creative block, with perfectionism, all of the things that mire us down and keep us from doing the creative things that bring us joy, that make us happy, that give us what we need in our lives. It is really hard for us to do those things. And when we follow these guideposts, it will get us into creative flow. So when I turn to I have a poster of I have a song that I wrote about my 10 guideposts. And when I follow those guideposts, it never fails to get me out of stuck and back into flow. For example, number 5 is when in doubt, just start. Just start. Whenever I'm working on writing a blog post or a newsletter or a new song or a painting, we're all afraid of the blank page, right? Whether it's a visual art or you're writing something or whatever it is, the metaphorical blank page, we are all afraid of it. And how do you deal with the blank page, fear of the blank page? You make it unblank. How do you make it unblank? Just make a mark. Just do anything. Just start. It's like you want to get some clean water to drink. You turn on a rusty faucet. What comes out? It's gunky. It's rusty. It's bleh. How do you get to the clean water? You just let it flow. And that is how you're going to get to the clean water. That first stuff that comes out, you're just going to let it flow. You're not going to drink that. That's not going to be the good stuff. But guess what? We need the crap to fertilize the good stuff. So that's an example of when I follow those guideposts, it's always going to get me to creative flow.
So good. I love the idea now that you've described as the way, because if you think of a 10-step process and you're like, I've passed number 3, I'll never have to go back there again. But in this, you are seeing you're going to continue to face these obstacles. You'll continue to face these challenges. So here's a method, here's a way to think about it rather than just check it off a list.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
And as you describe, oftentimes our analytical mind does get in the way. And we want to have a creative mindset. And those people that you might coach, consult, counsel with the analytical mind. Here's a way to get unstuck. Here's a way to maybe get past just thinking of the data, just thinking the business product.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, my Create the Impossible framework is really a distilling down of my Creative Sandbox Way. I have my 10 guideposts from the Creative Sandbox Way, and I've distilled those guideposts down into my Create the Impossible framework, which is 3 steps. Play hard. First step, play hard. And no, that just has nothing to do with going to Vegas and getting wild, or getting drunk or something. That just means to get into the mind space of being a 4-year-old again. Play hard, step 1. Step 2, make crap. If you can let yourself make crap, let go of your perfectionism, have a lot of self-compassion, just go make a lot of crap. That's step 2. And step 3 is learn fast.
Mm.
You've made your crap. And now what have you learned from it? And how are you going to iterate? And this is a cycle. And again, it's a way, it's a method, and it is a continual method. So if you play hard, make crap, and learn fast, that is a method for generating breakthroughs and innovations. And that is the same method whether you are an artist or whether you're working in a tech company and you're trying to innovate new products and services.
Yes. And I think about you applying this in a workshop or retreat setting, especially with teams. Maybe you could share, and nothing confidential if you can't, but share a success story. When did a team come into the room and need to play hard or need to just get it out and then figure it out later? Have you seen this in a story that you could share?
My Create the Impossible framework is new enough that I haven't used it with teams in a way that I can share that specific case study. But what I can share is I'll share a great story of some of the work that I've done with Meta, with Facebook research teams. And one of the tools that I love to use is I use a lot of activities from the world of theater and improv. And I do a lot of work. So innovation lies at the intersection of connection, communication, and creativity.
Mm.
And if you imagine a team, an organization where people are not connecting, where people are not communicating effectively, and where people are not tapping into their innate creativity, where people don't even think of themselves as creative, would you think that company is innovating
Right.
at their peak? Probably not, right? Now, take that same company and imagine that they are now connecting really well, that people really connect well together, and that they're communicating really effectively with each other. They don't have a lot of miscommunication. They're connecting for great impact and influence, and where they are really tapping into their innate creativity and that they think of themselves, they understand, yeah, I'm creative. I'm not just a tech person. I'm not just great at analysis or whatever. I'm also creative. And imagine how much more innovative this company is capable of being. Now, think about this is the work that I have done a lot of is in the communication realm with Meta and the research teams there. And one of the challenges that they have is it's really easy to try and explain something to somebody else and think that, why are they not understanding me?
Yes.
Something's wrong with them because they're not understanding me. What is their problem? So one of the activities that I love to do with teams is to pair them up. And one person in the pair, let's call them partner A, is from the present time. Everything's normal for them. But partner B is a time traveler from 500 years ago. So first we talk about, for a moment before we split them up and send them off in their separate little breakout areas or breakout rooms, what does that mean? What was different for people 500 years ago? And so we have a little brainstorming session. And so, Mark, what might have been different for people in their day-to-day lives in 1525?
Mm-hmm. It's a great prompt. And to talk about where I lived and how I got my food and what I did for work, all these things, right?
All these things, and
Yes.
maybe electricity, there wouldn't have been cars, and
Yes.
all sorts of things, right? So we talk about all those things for just a couple minutes. And then the prompt is, present time people, you can imagine that your cell phone just rang. And now your job is to explain to your time traveling partner what this device is in 2 minutes. However, think about it. There's a very strong likelihood that your time traveling partner is going to think you're a witch. That's their context. So you're going to also have to convince them while you're explaining what this device is and what it does, you're going to have to convince them that you're not a witch. And you have 2 minutes to do this. Now, this is an impossible exercise. I will share that right off the bat. Every time I've had to do it, it's impossible. But they do this, it creates a lot of laughter, and then we come back together and I poll the room. How many witches are in the room? Half the room is this.
Right.
But we also talk about what worked well and what didn't work well. What was effective? Time travelers, what did your partner do that was effective? And what always was effective is when the present time person uses something that speaks to the time traveler's life experience and their context, and usually uses some kind of analogy, talks about the phone in terms of whatever relates to that person's life experience. Maybe it's a quill on parchment, or maybe it's sparrows singing in a tree, or something that person can relate to. So then we switch roles. And so now the present time person has a leg up because they are thinking, what's the common ground? What's an analogy that I can use? What's their context? So then, of course, we come together and we have a debrief and we talk about this, and they start to connect some dots. So I've had great stories from participants in this activity sharing back during the week between last time when we did this activity and this week when we're meeting again. I had a conversation with a cross-functional teammate, and he didn't understand what I was talking about, and I was getting really frustrated. And then I remembered the time traveler activity, and I realized it's on me.
Mm.
It's not his fault. He's not being a jerk, but it's on me to explain and to figure out what the common ground is. And I was able to find an analogy and explain to him so that he could understand. And it was so exciting.
Yes.
I was able to do that. And I've had so many of that kind of report back after that activity. So that's the kind of creative work that I get to do now with teams, which is really fun.
Oh, it sounds like it. I know based on these stories and your description, people are going to want to connect with you and learn more about your work and your book and your retreats and seminars, of course. Where can we find you and connect with you?
Yeah, you can always find me on my website at melissadinwiddie.com. That's MELISA, D as in David, IN as in Nancy, WID as in David, IE.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn at Melissa Dinwiddie as well. Those are the best places to reach me. You can also find me on Instagram at _creative_life. And I wanted to let you know that I made a special little gift for podcast listeners. If you go to this link that I'm about to share, you can download the first 50 pages of my book for free.
Fantastic.
And the link is bit.ly/Y, W, lowercase o, capital C, thank you. And the thank you is all lowercase. And that is, of course, your world of creativity, an acronym for your world of creativity. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll put all those links in the show notes, but especially the free offer. We really appreciate that resource. Thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to share.
Yes. Melissa, what a great conversation about creativity in general as a concept, but steps and methods and milestones and guideposts, as you described them, to really get our creativity off the ground. Thanks for sharing those.
My pleasure. And thanks so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And really this idea of inspiring people to dream bigger, just in the title, Create the Impossible. Why not? Especially these days, because what's impossible anymore?
Right?
Yes. We thought was impossible 500 years ago. Here we are. So that's a great story about that prompt. I'll have to use that technique. Listeners, I hope you've enjoyed my conversation with Melissa Dinwiddie. We've had such a great kind of broad conversation about creativity, but we've also drilled it into life lessons, business lessons, and outcomes of meetings. And who doesn't go to a meeting every day and say, boy, I could improve the outcome? So let's apply some of these. And I hope you not only enjoyed this episode, but maybe past episodes, and keep tuning in. I'd love for you to be able to leave us a review, a rating. It really helps us reach even more creative minds who might discover the show, and you tell them what you liked about it, and maybe they can gain from it too. So come back again next time. We'll continue our around the world journeys. We've stopped off in the Bay Area today to stamp our creative passport with Melissa, but we'll continue to travel around the world to find out how creative people get inspired, organize ideas, but we've talked today how to make some connections, how to gain the confidence, how to create the impossible, to bring our work out into the world. And that's what we're all about. Also want to thank our sponsor, White Cloud Coffee Roasters. You can enjoy a 10% discount when you use the code CREATIVITY at checkout. Just visit whitecloudcoffee.com and grab your next favorite brew. So until next time, keep creating the world of creativity around you, and we'll keep unlocking your world of creativity. I'm Mark Stinson, and we'll see you next time.